Right, for our next session, we are going to be talking about achieving inclusion, and I'm delighted that we've been joined by John Brennan, the director of the CIA. John Brennan, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You've been the director of the CIA since 2013, and where you've been sort of leading the charge to make the agency, which has a history of discrimination and distrust, more inclusive. How and when did that process begin? Because you've been there a very long time, on and off, haven't you?
Yeah, well, first of all, Tom, thank you so much for the invitation to come here. I am very honored to represent CIA because I think we've made a lot of strides over the years. This is my second stint at CIA. I first started back in 1980 and worked 25 years at CIA. And I must say, when I think back into that time in 1980 when I first joined the agency, it was a hostile environment to the LGBT community. People were not allowed, in fact, to be openly gay. And
they were being actively filtered out, in fact, on the basis that this made them a security risk because they had to keep their sexuality secret so they could be open to blackmail, which is kind of circular logic, isn't it?
It is. So both we kept out people who wanted to join the intelligence community and CIA, but also those that were able to get into the system. They suppressed themselves, and as you said, I think that's what made them then vulnerable. In fact, I can remember when I went through some polygraphs early on. There were some, lifestyle polygraphs. They'll ask you questions about, your habits and personal life, and there were rather sort of intrusive questions that were asked of me in terms of my, sexual preferences, and so this is something that I've seen evolve over the years, and over 35 years, I think CIA has done a 180. And I'd like to think that we are, in fact, leading the charge now in many respects. And I'm just so proud of the fact that the agency has been able to, I think, capitalize on some of the movements that have been made in the federal government, in the courts, as well as various presidential determinations and decisions. And so we are quite proud of what we've been able to do. And it's not just because it's the right thing to do. And it's not just because we're trying to correct some past, missteps of ours. It is a very important thing to do for CIA. We have global responsibilities. We need to be able to explain this world and all of its complexities to the president and senior officials. And so I want to have as inclusive and diverse an environment as possible. I want people with different backgrounds and experiences. I don't want everybody who looks like me or thinks like me or has the same background and experiences. So there were so many people within that LGBT community who had tremendous, tremendous credentials and capabilities, whether it be foreign experiences, cultural, linguistic, and we were depriving ourselves of having the richness of that diversity within our workforce. So there's a strong, strong business case for CIA. In fact, within the US government, I can make a case that CIA has the strongest business case for this.
And why does the CIA have a stronger case than any other part of the government, do you think?
Because we operate all over the world in so many different environments. We go where a lot of other US departments and agencies do not go. And that's why that diversity and richness of experience is so important. And that LGBT community, they come from all different parts of the world as they come here to the United States. So Americans who are applying to the agency will bring with them their backgrounds and diverse experiences. And many of them are represented within the LGBT community. So again, I don't want to deprive the CIA of having that opportunity to be able to tap into what I think is an exceptionally rich and sort of powerful environment for being able to help us do our work.
Well, we've heard very similar arguments from other, you could say the CIA is a multinational, I suppose. The sort of classic reasons for promoting diversity and inclusion are exactly that you want to be able to draw from the widest pool of talent. The other two reasons that were given were that you have sort of more innovation, and also, actually, I can't remember what the third one was, but the idea that this is a business. Do you also see a kind of more collaboration? Oh, that's right. It's the third one is reaching out to new market segments. I'm not sure that one applies to the CIA, but on the sort of collaboration and creativity side, I'm just interested in sort of chasing through the analogy between the companies and the business case for companies and the business case for what is actually quite a different organization.
A lot of people think CIA is a unique organization. We are in many respects because of our authorities and our responsibilities. But in many respects, we have the same challenges as well as the opportunities that are out there as a private company would, or a multinational corporation. And we need to be able to, again, have the opportunity to address all of the various challenges we face around the world. We have been a leader in innovation in so many respects over the course of time. CIA has some of the best scientists and technologists and engineers. And again, they come from different backgrounds and different experiences in order to help to address U.S. national security concerns. But on the multilateral side, we have partnerships around the world. We engage with security and intelligence services on every single continent. And this world is becoming much more interconnected as well as interoperable. And it's not just for companies, it's also for government agencies. And so given this global presence and the interaction that we have with so many others, we need to make sure that we're not insulating ourselves. We need to have the exposure. And if the CIA was depriving itself of having a certain segment of our society, that just demonstrates an insularity that I think undermines what it is we're trying to accomplish.
So let's talk about recruitment in particular. What's been your approach to improving diversity and inclusion in recruitment? And do you have a particular challenge because of the CIA's history?
Well, we do. And when I came on board, about a year afterward, I asked Vernon Jordan to lead a study, a diversity and leadership study in the agency. And it was a very, very candid and critical review of the agency's performance over the last several decades. We have very laudable ambitions and goals, but we were never able to follow through on it. And so they came up with a number of findings as well as recommendations. And even before their study was finished, we put together an action plan and people who are going to be responsible for implementing a number of those findings. And was looking at diversity and leadership. And obviously, if you don't have the pipelines, if you don't have the system that's going to help groom and develop your people at the various levels, you're not going to have then the type of diversity in your leadership that you want. So recruitment is so important. I frequently will go out to our recruitment blitzes. Just 2 weeks ago, I met with about 120 people who are coming in from all different parts of the country. I emphasize diversity and inclusion because that's what our business and what our mission is all about. And I want to make sure people feel that CIA is a welcoming organization. We refer to ourselves as family. And I want to make sure people from all different backgrounds and walks of life, whether it be the LGBT or individuals with disabilities or Hispanics, African Americans, that they really see CIA as a place where they can grow professionally and personally.
And is there a generational effect? We were talking about this earlier on, whether there's a sort of cohort effect. Are you able to measure whether you are actually succeeding and you have greater diversity in the younger people who are coming through the ranks?
Yeah, we keep some data and statistics, obviously. What I want to do is make sure that we don't just focus on those statistics. I want to make sure we have an environment and a system that is going to ensure that as we bring somebody into the organization, that they have the opportunities to grow and develop. Because what we noticed over the years is that some of those individuals from diverse backgrounds did not thrive within the organization. Maybe they were in career tracks that topped out at a certain level. I want to make sure that we have a holistic appreciation of the obstacles as well as the opportunities that we want to enhance within the agency. So yes, we monitor it. We take a look at how many of our employees are from the various backgrounds. But as you know, we don't keep statistics on LGBT. But I must say that within CIA, we have organizations that are dedicated to the advancement of LGBT interests and employees. It's very active, very engaged. I've met with them a number of times, and I go to a number of their functions. I want to make sure that people feel as though they have every opportunity to present themselves as part of the CIA family to their colleagues, as well as to those who might be interested in coming to CIA.
So you have to have the processes, but you also have to show leadership personally, lead from the top and show that this is a priority for you as well.
Yeah, and I have taken a personal interest in this, and I think for several reasons. One is that I remember back when CIA was in the old days, and also I think I'm trying to make up also for some lost time. I grew up right across the river here in New Jersey in the 70s, and it was a time when there was a lot of hostility toward LGBT community. And I think I was silent at the time because it was the prevailing environment, and I didn't speak up. I didn't react the way I should have. And I look back on it now and I say, damn, why didn't I? And so I don't ever want to be in the position of being passive and remaining silent on something that I see that is wrong for so many reasons. And so I have the great opportunity now. I never dreamed I'd be director of CIA, and I'm going to take full advantage of my position, my authority, my power, to be able to make some changes within CIA.
We heard a very similar story from some CEOs earlier on who said being a CEO is awesome because you get to change stuff, and this is what I'm going to change. Continuing with the analogy between business and the agency, obviously the agency is a multinational that operates in many foreign markets, you might say, and it may have to operate in countries where with restrictive and discriminatory laws, and it may, by the nature of the work, you have to operate undercover, but this is sort of what is the approach that you have been taking to dealing with the fact that you are on the one hand promoting inclusion internally, but you may actually have to be operating in countries where there are anti-LGBT laws on the books.
Well, I think whenever we deploy our officers overseas in all the various countries, we have to take into account what are the risks, what are the challenges that exist, whether it be from a professional standpoint, an operational standpoint, but also from a cultural standpoint. And I am not going to make one of my officers go to a place where they feel personally at risk because of who they are and because the environment does not accept who they are. But what we're trying to do is to make sure that every agency officer has the opportunity to pursue those avenues of professional growth and development. But clearly, the world has a diversity of views toward the LGBT community. Thankfully, our society in 2016 has come light years from where it was before. But I think we recognize, just like democracy is at different stages of evolution in different parts of the world, so is acceptance of the LGBT community around the world. So I find, though, that more and more countries are also being enlightened, and therefore our LGBT employees have ample opportunity to carry out their CI responsibilities around the world.
But I suppose one difference would be that we've heard from companies that do feel a responsibility not just to look after their employees internally, but also to advocate more broadly. And I assume that that's not something that the CIA is involved in, because you're not public about your activities.
No, but as I mentioned before, we have a lot of counterparts around the globe, intelligence security services, and one of the things that we really try to do is to make sure that they are professionalized, not just building up their capabilities in order to address the various security and other types of challenges, but in terms of human rights and making sure that they adhere to standards of human rights practices, which includes the LGBT community. So I wouldn't have any problem whatsoever if I felt as though one of the security services was violating what I believe are universal standards. But you're right, I'm not going to go up and...
Now that is interesting, because that means there is actually an advocacy piece. It's just it's internal advocacy, as it were, with the partner organizations that you're dealing with.
There is a mechanism in those channels, and I want to make sure that if we're going to be partnering with these other organizations, that they meet what I consider to be our minimum standards for that type of partnership.
And how do you see the attitudes towards LGBT rights within those organizations that you deal with? Because it's a bit like having partner organizations for any other company, and they may. How much progress do you see those other organizations making relative to yours?
I think they really reflect the cultural norms and standards within the countries that they operate. There is, as we well know, tremendous hypocrisy around the world in terms of what is deemed to be acceptable publicly and what is practiced privately. And the fact that there are still governments and influencers in these countries who will rail against LGBT individuals, but yet privately will transgress a number of things, as well as being hypocritical about the LGBT phenomenon itself. And so it can be very frustrating when I go to various countries and I see the public displays and public attitudes, and then what I see is, in fact, condoned and allowed privately, including by those in the government at the highest levels.
Well, I've been astonished to see that there are such close parallels between what you're doing and what we've heard from the corporate sector. I'd like to open things up to the floor now, so please ask your questions. You can ask them via the app, of course, or the old-fashioned stand up and wave your hand way. But we're happy either way. So do we have any questions for Director Brennan? We have a hand has been raised in the middle here. Please tell us who you are before going any further.
Javier Barrientos from Biogen. I think they're getting used to me now. So I have a question. At lunchtime, we heard a concern about foreign governments infiltrating social media as a way to identify LGBT people in those countries where there are crusades against the LGBT community. I was wondering if you could comment on that, and what could companies like mine do to keep our employees safe?
Well, governments around the world, depending on their philosophies and ideologies, will pursue various avenues to try to uncover information that they can use to discredit individuals. And it is really quite shameful that people still look at issues of sexual preference. But you raise an issue that I think has very broad application right now, which is what is the role of government, what is the role of intelligence and security services in that new frontier, which is the digital domain. And I think this is what this country is wrestling with right now. What are the obligations, responsibilities of government to ensure that there is the security that can be found in that environment, but at the same time, not violating privacy and civil liberties? And what is that balance? And it's playing out in the courts and it's playing out in a number of areas. But social media is that new environment. And so what should governments be allowed to do and not allowed to do? And it runs the gamut from governments that really adhere to the rule of law to those governments that will adhere only in word and not in practice to the legal systems. So I do think that the explosion within the social media environment is something that we're all having to come to grips with. And what are the standards of behavior, as well as what are the standards of government involvement? This is a debate and a dialogue that I think is going to continue in the coming years, so that just like we have an understanding of what the role of the police on the streets or at our airports or seaports in that physical domain, what is the role of the government in that digital domain, which is something that basically has just been discovered in the last several decades. And so a lot of our legal systems and practices are from the 20th century, when we didn't have a digital domain, when we didn't have the opportunities that we have right now to interact. And the fact that most human transactions and interactions take place in that digital domain, whether you're talking about social or educational or financial, commercial, we really need, as a country and as a society, and then also as an international society, to come to some terms with what is the appropriate role of government. Because as we know, that environment is one that is used and exploited by a lot of individuals for evil intent. And striking that balance is so difficult, and that's why this debate is raging right now in the United States about what the government should and shouldn't be able to do. It's a healthy debate. It's one that has understandable sort of tensions in it, but it's one that we must have.
Speaking of which, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you about the controversy that is swirling around your recent remarks that, quote, "we don't steal secrets." Isn't that your job?
I have, in my last 3 years, spent a lot of time telling people that CIA is not a rogue organization. We adhere to the laws of the United States. What we do is lawful. We have to have duly authorized direction to carry out our responsibilities, whether it be covert action or collection. And so when people say that we steal and lie and cheat and torture, what I'm saying is that if we adhere to our authorities and we adhere to what it is that we are asked to do, we are operating fully within the law. So when I hear you steal is something that is against the law. And when I was saying that we don't steal secrets, we uncover them, we elicit them, we find them, we obtain them, we plead for them. We want to know the secrets that are going to give us insight into what's happening around the world. But our authorities say that we need to, in fact, pursue our clandestine collection authorities and capabilities, which we do with great success.
So to go back to the question, in other words, if you clandestinely collect, i.e. steal, information from someone in a foreign country, that is operating within the framework of US law as far as what you're allowed to do. So that's the distinction you're making.
Absolutely. I'm trying to emphasize the importance of CIA adhering to the laws of the United States, and we need to make sure that we do not go beyond that. And so that's my point. Yes, we get those secrets. We do it fully consistent with US law.
US law.
And as long as I'm at CIA, we're going to be consistent with US law.
Brilliant. We have a question that's been submitted through the app. Would you ever speak to a leader in private about the difference between their public stance on LGBT issues and their private actions and pressure them to change? I'm assuming this is a this is a political leader in a foreign country, particularly in countries where your influence might save lives. Have you had those sorts of conversations?
I have talked in general about the dissonance between the practices in private and what is accepted in public. The questioner makes a good point, and I can think of opportunities that maybe I should raise it. Now, what I have to be careful about, again, is not sort of straying outside of my intelligence role. In terms of advocating for different types of social reforms in countries. I want to make sure that what I'm doing is not sort of usurping the responsibilities of some of my partners within the US government. But that's a good point, and since I deal with foreign leaders and partners on a regular basis, I will keep that in mind in terms of, I can think of a couple of opportunities that I will be able to.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, anonymous questioner, for subtly steering policy. I think we have time for one more question over here. So.
No, I was just saying that was my question.
Oh, that was your question. Okay, good for you. Not very good at keeping a low profile. Don't hire. Yeah, exactly.
Don't apply to CIA.
Yeah, exactly. Don't bother. You're fired. I think we have time for one more question. Do we have any more questions from the floor? Yes, we have a question here.
Hi. As a multinational firm, the firms have to adhere to, regardless of where they're headquartered, have to adhere sometimes to or all the time to the country in which they operate or countries in which they operate. For my firm, for example, if they are trying to collect private data on who self-identifies as LGBT, they may not be able to actually collect that data legally within the confines of that country. Does the CIA not have the ability to do that, or can they kind of get around it as long as it's legal within the United States? Are you able to collect that type of data for your employees to know them better?
We have very strong authorities as far as collecting information, collecting data, collecting secrets that are integral to U.S. national security. And we go after information that has a bearing on and directly relevant to our national security interests around the globe. And so there has to be a basis, a premise for us to be able to pursue it. We don't go after, for example, business information because, we don't try to advantage U.S. businesses in the international environment. But what we will do is try to find out what individuals or countries are doing that might be inimical to U.S. interests and to understand what is going on. So a lot of it is very case dependent, depending on the country, the issue, what is it that we are really trying to understand and find out. But as I said, outside of the United States, we have tremendous ability to collect information if it is relevant and important to keeping the people in this room as well as rooms around the country as well as around the world safe. And
I think that the question was also about the extent to which you can and do gather that information about your own workforce. Is that something you
about
said
our
earlier
own
on?
workforce?
Yes, you said earlier on that you didn't. Yeah, you said earlier on, I think, that you didn't collect that information about your workforce.
Well, right, in terms of we ask our workforce if they want to identify themselves as African American or Hispanic, whatever. We don't ask them the question about LGBT. There are, as I said, organizations within CIA where, in fact, there is the membership of it, so it's not as though it's something that we, again, suppress at all. But we would not, I do not know of any instance where we would go out looking for information about an individual's sexual preference. We do want to make sure we understand how foreign services could exploit vulnerabilities within our organization. But I believe that an individual's sexual preferences is a very private matter that they can handle the way they want. But what we want to do is to make sure that our adversaries are not going to try to take advantage of individuals' vulnerabilities.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. John Brennan, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.